Danganronpa, a series that I hold about as close to my heart as Ace Attorney and Sonic, which could be for better or for worse. I'll play through them all, besides Ultra Despair Girls, and I've been slowly working my way to collecting all the achievements for the games, and generally this fuck-ass bear's voice is permanently etched into my mind. So, when Komaeda's face all of a sudden decided to do the funniest jump scare in internet history, I fully lost my mind because all of a sudden, I'm back in the fucking building again! So, for those who don't know, Danganronpa 2x2, subtitle pending, I assume, is a completely remade version of the second game in the Danganronpa series, Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. That's a lot of Danganronpas. By remade, I don't just mean fitting it for modern consoles and readjusting / updating the visuals a bit, and then that's it, in the same vein as the modern version of Persona 3 Portable, or the less than stellar Plant vs. Zombies Replanted. No, this is a complete remake of the entire game. You can notice this in series artist and producer Rei Komatsusaki's improvement and art style changes in the new visuals. Notably, Raincoat's aesthetic and style coming through a lot more now in the limited artwork we have of 2x2. The environments also seem to be completely redone, with the 3D segments we've seen giving us an insight how it won't just be the same locations again, something that was stated in an interview with Famitsu, with the series producer. I can't help but draw comparisons, as the game clearly is building off V3's exploration segments, which was one of the few points that V3 improved on from earlier entries. This remake will also feature a second story mode, which is an alternative version of the game's events, with brand new victims and culprits. That's about all we know for the time being, and by the time I'm writing this video, we've gotten very limited amount of information on the game as a whole. We're limited to the game store page, the announcement trailer, and this Famitsu interview. The November demo isn't going to be news, because if it's anything like Danganronpa's previous demos, Yasuhiro will be lying in that shit-ass bathroom once again. The second story has had fans speculating about who's absolutely screwed, who's stupid enough to commit moida, and who will actually survive until the very end of this asinine story, and I, myself, would like to throw my own hat into this ring. Massive and rather blatant spoiler warning ahead. This isn't just for Danganronpa 2, given that I'm using the original story as to try to speculate on who's gonna die, survive, and who'll be committing crimes within the reimagined second story, but also the original Danganronpa and V3, as their cast will be considered for the suspicions and choices I will be making. It's also worth noting that I will not be talking or going off information based on the Danganronpa anime. Personally, I see the anime as extended canon or semi-canon due to its nature as supplementary material. Hence, the Acolytes of Despair will not be considered for personalities and capabilities for Class 77B of Hope's Peak. It is also worth noting that this will be part 1 of 2 for the predictions. I do this mainly to create a more cohesive experience for the viewers, with part 1 focusing on the ones that will be remaining alive for the entirety of the games, such as protagonists and survivors, whilst the second half deals with the deceased parties, such as the victims and the killers. Everybody got that? Coolio. And if you want to play Danganronpa, I'd highly recommend you do so before finishing this video. Okay? We all good? Well then, let's not dilly-dally any longer. We've got a lot of characters to go through, so let's give it everything we've got. It's prediction time! Oh god. I can't do a Monokuma voice anymore. So, who's first up? What the fuck? If you had asked me when I first started scripting this who I thought was going to be the protagonist, I would have said Hajime, 100% guaranteed. My thought process then was that you can't have Danganronpa 2 without Hajime. He's the core of the story, being the only normal one who steps up to solve the mysteries of the whole ordeal, but also that he is kinda at fault for all of this occurring. I went into this project with the mindset that Chapter 6 would remain unchanged somehow, that we would have the same old song and dance of
You're Izuru Kamakura, you're Izuru Kamakura, you're Izuru Kamakura, you're Izuru.
But that doesn't make any sense. It's a remake that's supposed to take new twists and turns, going in with the assumption that the 5 cases leading up till the end will be filled with new ideas, just to then stop and go back to how it used to be is kind of ridiculous on my part. Hajime has as big a chance to die as anyone else now, and it wouldn't stop for a new twist on Chapter 6. Hajime could die whilst leaving his body in the virtual world to be taken over by, well, Izuru Kamakura, leading to a Chapter 6 where we actually get to face off against the man himself. Not only that, but a sudden perspective shift leading into our new protagonist having to invest Hajime's death would be really sick to see. This sort of thing wouldn't go against the spirit of this alternative story like keeping the same Chapter 6 would, but that leaves the question, who could take the lead? Well, there are definitely a few options to choose from, but one person I immediately could see as the protagonist is Nagito Komaeda. He's definitely an odd choice for a protagonist, given his uniqueness in the original story. And with Nagito, I feel like it would be a real twist to see him suddenly to take the lead. Mr. Biggest Roadblock who can't and won't shut up to save his life. Given his willingness to let himself die or try to murder someone else, a morally grey protagonist is something that is yet to be seen in this series. I believe that he could add to the twist by even mixing up the gameplay, reintroducing live bullets from V3 in a much bigger role and actually having a greater focus rather than a minute side piece like there were in V3. I could even see Nagito having a mechanic to create fluff statements, and opposite version to Hangman's Gambit as to try to lure out the suspect. Nagito could be a huge mix-up to not only how the story goes, but also how the game works. After all, in that very same Famitsu article, the series producer never answered the question if the gameplay would change and if they'd add new minigames. They only said that they'd announce it at a later date. Also, Nagito is Kodaka's favorite little special boy, otherwise he wouldn't be fucking everywhere. So that is another reason as to why I believe him to be an alternative protagonist. However, there is another candidate for the protagonist role. Chiaki Nanami, the ultimate gamer. She already has a major part in the original story, often investigating alongside Hajime, much like Kyoko before her, and much like Kyoko before her, seems to be one step ahead of us at all points. But that might be an issue. How much of a difference would Chiaki make as a protagonist? She's already pretty close to Hajime, that we get to interact with her plenty. She becomes a secondary protagonist. There would, however, be a pretty big distinction in her not being human. I always thought that the fact that we, as the player, would already know that Chiaki, being an AI, would take away from her character. That it would be on the same level as knowing that Hajime is Izuru Kamakura. But that's not the case. I mean, her reactions alone would be a lot more calculated, less panicked, and more logical. It would be like playing as a detective in a mystery game. Wait, hang on. Maybe even Monomi, well, or Usagi, would play a bigger role for Chiaki during gameplay. Say, some kind of additional evidence gathering through some stealth segments, listening in to what other has to say, and trying to connect that with the evidence in front of you. So, yeah, despite her role in the original game, I still think that her as the protagonist would create for an interesting experience. In any case, for this video, as it is my video and my predictions, will go in with the baseline that Hajime is the continued protagonist, just to make things easier. Oh, right. Something I forgot to mention in this video is that I won't be going into case specifics. I'm going to try my best to refrain from discussing motives, locations, class trials, and which culprit has killed which victim. I do this mainly due to the fact that there are way too many outcomes that has logical merit to them. Plus, I have no kinds of clues what motives could even be presented in this alternate story, given that no game has had the same motives, besides maybe the motivational videos from 1 and V3. But with our protagonist discussed, let's move right into the... Not counting Hajime, I believe that they'll stick to the same number of survivors as the original, 4. There are 4 people who stick out incredibly well in this cast who I genuinely believe will survive till the very end. Now, of course, I will be sharing my additional thoughts as to why I speculate these being our new survivors, so let's start with the order they were eliminated in. Starting with... the Ultimate Imposter. Straight to the point, I definitely think he'll survive Chapter 1, Destination Despair, and same proxy goes for Teru. Now for the meat of potatoes, or maybe the meat on the bone and potatoes. I have full confidence that the Ultimate Imposter, who I will just refer to as Togami, is going to survive the killing game. Main thoughts are built on who Togami is. He's someone who took the role of a leader in hopes to lead the rest of his class out of the killing game. Now obviously one could argue that his leader role was simply him acting as Byakuya, but I believe that there's more to that. I do really believe that the Ultimate Imposter wanted all of his classmates to be safe. Even if he didn't know them that well, he still wanted them to survive. Otherwise he wouldn't have sacrificed himself to protect Nagito, someone who was actively reaching for a knife during the party. That alone makes for an interesting character, someone who actively goes out of their way to prevent any killings. Well, obviously I don't expect him to actually succeed. That kind of heroic nature and willpower in a character is rather lonesome to Togami. We saw that Togami prioritized everyone's safety over, say, dismantling the killing game. To me, that feels like the true face of the Ultimate Imposter, letting how he feels shine through his actions, all the while maintaining the appearance of Byakuya Togami. However, something I briefly thought about is that Togami could just be a copycat of Byakuya's character from Danganronpa 1. So maybe it wouldn't be interesting to have a repeat of someone we already had, not only as a pivotal character, but as another survivor. Furthermore, a point can be made that the Ultimate Imposter is just a blank, a person with no face nor personality. But these thoughts kind of quickly vanished the more I thought about it, and the more I took in consideration Togami's events in Goodbye Despair's island mode, where towards the end he has a moment where Hajime finds out about Togami's secret about who he really is, and this follows with learning that he just wants to exist, that he doesn't want to live behind lies. And even if the island mode is non-canon, I still feel like it's important to value it. From my understanding, it's still written by the same team as the base game, so the words still hold meaning within the universe. It's non-canon, but it's not out of character. Well, with my point made clear, next in line is Peko Pekoyama, the ultimate swordswoman. My main thought surrounding her survival is her relationship to Fujihiko. In the original game, Peko saw herself as nothing more than a tool to serve one person and one person alone, the ultimate Yakuza, Fujihiko Kusaryu. This is displayed when Peko took actions into her own hands, believing it to be her master's wish to kill Mahiru Koizumi, the ultimate photographer. This leads into Chapter 2 and genuinely one of the most heartbreaking conversations in all of Danganronpa. This makes me feel nothing but severe pain every time I hear it, and after that conversation and Peko getting a warm British welcome, Fujihiko decides to change as a person, becoming a more cooperative and, dare I say, friendlier person. But that's not the point. Peko is a strong person, only dying due to acting as her master's weapon. So what would happen if Fujihiko was no longer in the picture? Now we'll touch on that a little further on. However, Fujihiko to me feels like he's absolutely going to be one of the victims. And instead, Peko is the one who survives, with a key difference: Fujihiko never really being able to tell Peko how he truly saw her, offering neither parties any chance to grow from it. I believe that they will then go on to make a story where Peko is forced out of her role as a tool and has to grow as her own person, someone that others can rely upon more clearly and act as a defense for the others. So, Hiyoko Saijoni, fuck, this name is hard to say. Hiyoko Saijoni, the ultimate traditional dancer anyway, is a very mixed character. Either you do like her or you don't. I personally, for the longest time, was rather against her, though that could be because I like Mikan and found her verbal assaults worse and worse for every time she opened her mouth. Now, however, that has changed. I don't dislike her anymore, and she absolutely isn't the worst character around. Now, admittedly, when thinking about my predictions, I thought Hiyoko would die again, but this time in an execution. However, she may be foul-mouthed and rude, but a murderer, I just can't see it. I mean, she is a failure. She's literally a girl failure. She can't even tie her own kimono. Imagining that she would orchestrate a whole murder with that in mind is rather difficult, so she can't exactly be killed off again given her original fate in Danganronpa 2, and 90% of the cast would make it rather difficult for her to kill given that she's comically short and weighs about as much as a sack of apples. I feel like anyone she would try to kill would just pick her up and toss her out the window. And then I considered the main players of Chapter 3. Mikan has the spine of a jellyfish, Hiyoko folds as soon as someone barks back at her, and Ibuki is the one that is most likely to kill. Girl's crazy, love that about her as a character, but this becomes more so a process of eliminations. Hiyoko becomes a survivor by default because of her own incompetence, and honestly, I'm here for that, because I think Hiyoko can make for an interesting survivor, given how we've seen other characters, like Fujihiko,
I'll sell your fucking ass to a whorehouse,
Kusaryu, develop during the game's story. So yeah, I'm very much hoping that this human chihuahua will make it through to see the end. Okay, admittedly, this next one, there's a lot of bias. Then again, this whole video is kind of slightly biased, but you get what I mean. Gundam Tanaka, the ultimate breeder. I really like Gundam. He is and still remains one of my favorite characters in this entire series. And I think a very important thing to note is that his death was purely his own choice. Gundam died because he wasn't ambushed, he wasn't caught off guard, he killed Nekomaru not for the sake of wanting to go home, but for the sake of wanting everybody else to survive. He effectively saved the rest of his starving class from the clown house from hell, whilst effectively knowing that he would die soon enough as well. So if you just remove the funhouse out of the plot, then Gundam guaranteed would have been slated to survive, and I think that's actually the route 2x2 is taking. So I hope that out of any of my predictions today, that this is the one that is right. Please, for the love of God, Mr. Danganronpa, let my boy live.